With only weeks away from this year's Junkanoo parades, tonight we take you on a journey deep into the heart of Bahamian culture. For generations, Junkanoo has been more than just a celebration. It's been a movement, a rhythm of resilience, and a living testament of our nation's spirit. Behind every Junkanoo parade, every costume, and every beat of the drum are the legends who have devoted their lives to this cultural treasure. Tonight, we'll hear from those who built and sustained the groups we know and love, those who have witnessed the evolution of Junkanoo from its earliest days. Join us as we explore the origins, the politics, the progress, and most importantly, the future of Junkanoo. This is On the Record, and our show begins on the other side of this break. Welcome back to tonight's conversation. We are joined by a true legend in the Junkanoo community, Arlene Nash Ferguson, also known as a mother of modern Junkanoo. Her influence and passion for Junkanoo have left an indelible mark not only on the parades themselves, but also in preserving this cultural legacy for future generations. I am honored to have her with me. The lady, and you know, I always have to lay all the facts out before we start. The lady who was one time my primary school principal at St. John's when I wore short pants and big shoes. It is a pleasure to have you here with us on the record tonight.
Thank you so much, Jerome. It is an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
And listen, let me get started by saying thank you for helping to preserve this important part of our culture, and we're going to dive into that in just a moment. But what you have been able to do through your work is nothing short of phenomenal for this country. So I want to start the conversation by taking us back to where and how and even why you got started in Junkanoo.
Yes. Well, first of all, it's such an honor to be here to chat with you about it. My Junkanoo journey, I always say, started actually before I was born. In 1942, there were Burma Road riots, and the government subsequently banned all street parading. So there was no Junkanoo on Bay Street from 1942 right up until 1948, although the drums never stopped beating in the African townships. In 1947, my uncle Ivern got together with a group of his friends, and they petitioned the government to have Junkanoo return to Bay Street. They were permitted to have a trial parade, New Year's 1948, and that is where I mark the beginning of the modern era of Junkanoo. And so, as you know, my father, H.O. Nash, died when I was 19 months old, and my mother promptly moved back home where this same, her brother, my uncle Ivern, was living. And so Junkanoo was a part of his experience, and at the age of 4 years, I asked if I could rush. And they thought it was cute. And only because he was out there, they permitted me to go. So I have been on Bay Street in one way or the other for virtually my entire life. And I am now, how old am I? 74.
And you know, my late mother said you never asked a lady her age.
No
but
problem.
You look
No
amazing for 74. But in the early days, though, you started out with the Saxons, correct? Or
In the early days, when I said I wanted to rush at 4, my aunt, who was working at GR Sweeting at the time, Spurgeon Smith was one of her customers, and he had a Junkanoo group that came from what we would call the pond.
Okay.
And she asked him, since my uncle Ivern was doing administrative chores on Bay Street, she asked Spurgeon if he would be so kind as to take this little girl with him. And so my first group was with Spurgeon Smith.
Okay.
And in the modern era, yes, it was the Saxons, and then in 1993, one family.
Take us back to those, we call it those early years, really, when the competitiveness started. You had the Valley Boys, you had the Saxons, I think in those days the Music Makers and a few others. What was it like though when Junkanoo was really, I guess, getting a foothold in the community and people really started coming in large numbers to Bay Street?
Yes. Junkanoo, when I was growing up, was really considered infra-dig. It was not something that people from good families did, and it was looked down upon. And if somebody called you a Junkanoo, you were ready to fight.
I can tell you a story.
It meant
my late uncle, Kurt Knowles, the first time he snuck out the house to rush with the Valley Boys, my grandfather, like my mother said, my grandfather almost killed him.
Yes.
He could not believe
That's right.
that his son had participated in Junkanoo.
And if somebody called you a Junkanoo, it meant that you were either carrying on stupidly or your clothes didn't match. You were rig up, we would say. And so Junkanoo, there was nothing positive about it in the public eye. And over the years, we have changed that.
What would you say helped to change that? What would you say changed the direction and caused us to really embrace this now as the premier event of our culture?
Knowledge is power. At least for me, knowledge is power. From 1948, those of us, and all of us virtually, have been born since then. We only know Junkanoo as a parade and a competition. And it is so much more than that. It came across the Atlantic Ocean in the depths of filthy slave ships, in the hearts and memories of our enslaved ancestors. And they were determined that their spirits would never be broken and that they would never be separated from their heritage. And so when, and this happened all year, but especially at Christmas time, when by law they were given 3 days holiday, they decided to use it to recreate their festivals from home. I'm being defined as an animal in this society. I cannot be an animal because when I was back home, we celebrated every rite of passage in the human experience with a ceremony and a ritual. When the baby was born, when somebody died, we will remind if only ourselves.
You say that, and I sit here, and I all the memories I have of watching Junkanoo parades, it now begins to make even more sense to me why we have this passion and this love, and the costuming is so brilliant and telling all of these stories.
In the African tradition, most of their festivals, Dr. Nicolette Bethel tells us in her book, that most West African festivals, even though the Africans were deliberately mixed by culture, used a goatskin drum, some kind of bell or rattle. You always decorated yourself fully, and when you covered your face, it symbolizes the presence of the ancestors. And I found it very significant that when we started to move from indigenous materials in which to adorn ourselves, we moved to paper. And for me, that is very significant because slaves were not encouraged, at best, forbidden to learn to read and write. We dressed ourselves in the paper that we were not permitted to to have. Junkanoo is so much deeper than parade and competition and who win and who should have win and who cheat. And that was what motivated me, that story I told you, to start EduCulture, because our children are being denied the power and strength of their history and their heritage when they do not know how Junkanoo started.
Do you think the competition and who win and how much they get, and do you think that has really taken away from the essence of what this should be?
I personally believe that. When I do my presentations on Junkanoo, I tell them, don't throw no rock or bottle at me. But I always say we have reduced it to a parade and a competition. Yes, that's my personal feeling.
And what do you think that has done? Because, part of the criticism you will hear spectators levy is that it is not an activity that is always spectator friendly. That we come out to watch it, you wait hours, there are all these things, and it is just not always spectator friendly.
It is not supposed to be. It is a celebration of self. It is for the people who are participating. If you want to come and watch us, that's fine. But you're laughing. But this is how let's duck all the rock coming. This is how we celebrate ourselves. I always have this conversation with Ronald Sims because he is a producer and he wants it to move smoothly and I'm saying, but that ain't gonna happen.
but it is interesting because we have taken the spectator part of Junkanoo and commercialized it. We sell tickets, we do all these things to make it the spectator event. When you have just wanted to spell that this is a participatory event.
It should be, yes. Well, the day will come when we will probably look at an activity, maybe at Christmas time, maybe at another time, where people will be able to jump in the line and participate spontaneously. This is what we try to do with the Independence Parade, and the groups are so cohesive now. It still ended up in groups and that kind of thing. Yeah.
So I guess that is part of where we want to take the discussion, because we've come from this being sort of everybody just jump in and participate to a now organized, more formal parade in many instances. But are we at the point now where you think we need to look at the next evolution so that people are able to enjoy Junkanoo or participate at different levels? The reality is, I don't have the time, I may not have the resources for a big costume to participate. I may not want that.
Yes.
But do you think we're at the point now where we need to look at creating other avenues for more Bahamians to participate?
Very much so. And it can be done, very much so.
Over the years, we have seen, we've gone from the major groups where it was the showdown between the major groups, and now those groups have splintered. You were part of one family when they started. What was that like? I want you to take us to that period where you and the late Jackson Burnside, I think, and others had made that decision. Okay, we can leave home base.
Yes, it's natural growth and evolution. And to cut a long story short, Silbert and I really did not have any plans to leave the Saxons, but by accident we chanced upon some friends of ours. We had heard rumors that people had left the Saxons, and we saw some friends of ours who were in the Saxons, and we said, we hear some people leave our group, and they say, yeah, that's us.
That's us.
Yeah, that's us. And Silbert said, without thinking, he never asked me what I thought. He just said instinctively, if you want to have a meeting out of town where nobody knows what you are doing, you are welcome to use our home. And that is how the first steering team of the One Family Junkanoo and community organization took place in our family room on January the 16th, 1993. And the rest, as they say, is history. We were determined to use the power of Junkanoo to build the community. Jackson Burnside and his brother Stan were absolutely adamant that the word family be in our name. And somebody said was another little group on Bay Street named The Family, and so we chose One Family. But it was all about community, and Jackson issued the famous words that have been the mantra of the group ever since. It is as important to win on East Street as it is on Bay Street. And that gave birth to One Family's very vibrant community outreach program.
Explain that phrase and why that's so important.
Because just winning a parade is not enough. We have to use the power of Junkanoo to build our people, to build our community. And that's why One Family did a rush to read, to encourage the children to read. One Family for years and years had a summer camp. Nowadays, One Family does the rush back to school, where they encourage children to do well. We have gone into schools and presented children with certificates for their excellence. And so that is the core of One Family, and it was deliberate to juxtapose the words family, community, and Junkanoo in its very name.
You have taken this parade, this part of our culture, this thing that we love so much, and you have expanded it into educulture, into lecture series. You have taken it far beyond Bay Street. What motivated you to do that?
It struck me. Well, first of all, my background, of course, is my first degree was in history. And so history is special to me. I did not think about it until I started to understand how Junkanoo started. And then it struck me that every time you say the word Junkanoo to a Bahamian, whether they are 5 or 50, they will holler out the name of their group.
No lies told.
And as a teacher, I'm saying to myself, hold on here. We are denying our children the strength of their history and their heritage. The fact that our people could celebrate in the midst of the most horrendous circumstances known to man. This me now. You can't kill me. You can't kill my spirit, and I will recreate my festivals from home. You can't tell me I'm an animal. I ain't hearing that. And I'm saying to myself, the children have to understand the strength of their history. And so Silbert and I sat down and talked about it. And he asked me, what do you really want to do? What is your dream job? I said, I want to work with children, but not in a formal school setting. I want to share my knowledge of social studies and Junkanoo. And he said, well, why don't you start with a summer camp? So we did a Junkanoo summer camp at our house. And by that September, I had converted my childhood home into a Junkanoo museum, and the rest, as they say, is history. 24 years later, I thank God for it. It was a stupid idea, as we would say in Junkanoo, but it worked.
I have to congratulate you for, helping us to preserve and understand our culture. That is so very important. I mean, just sitting here today, you gave me such a lesson, and I'm sure the viewers such a lesson many of us did not even consider, certainly didn't know about.
Thank you.
But sometimes you're involved in things and you don't know why you have that passion and love.
That's
but
right.
you certainly explained it so well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Continue to do the great work. Our country is so much better for what you have done and are continuing to do. So thank you so much for doing it. We need it. I didn't say we needed it. We need it.
We need it,
It needs to
absolutely.
continue. We
Yes.
definitely need it. So all the best for you.
Thank you. Your words have honored me. It was a privilege being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. All right, when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with another Junkanoo legend. Now, let me tell you all, you know, it's a valley. So this could be a tough one. Stay with us. We're going to be back right after this. Welcome back. Our next guest truly needs no introduction. Often referred to as the King of Junkanoo, Percy Francis. His iconic leadership in the Saxon Superstars and influence on the art form has been monumental in shaping Junkanoo as we know it today. Sir, welcome to On the Record.
It is so good to be joining you, Jerome.
And listen, you know, this is proof that you could be on opposing sides on Bay Street and still be friends, right? Well, listen, it's good to have you. I want to ask you first, though, you know, what is it that keeps inspiring you to be so heavily involved in Junkanoo? We just, before coming on, talked about you just came back from Atlanta participating in an event there with Delta, which was fantastic. But what keeps inspiring you to do this day after day, year after year?
Okay, you have to blame my late father, Reverend Dr. Earl Francis, for all of this, right? Because there was something that he saw in me. And he sent me to art school in St. Agnes schoolroom, right? And we lived through the bakery corner. So it was just a 2-minute walk there. And so being born in that area, I was a city boy as well, you see? And so he saw something in me. And he sent me to Don Russell to do sketching. And there I was at the age of 5 and 6, 7 years old, working with Don. And of course, you know, being born in that particular area, that was a Junkanoo community, with Chippy and the boys and what have you, all of those groups coming out of there. And so you just continuously hear this thing. Now, I couldn't go to Bay Street at an early age, but about 5, Dad will take me downtown. It was only like a 5 minutes walk.
Sure.
And so he'd take me downtown, and then there was this man called Sweet Richard, who was a cutlass wielder, dressed like a buccaneer and so on, and he's swinging this cutlass around my head, and for some reason, him and Dad must have been tight, because every time I go out, he'll do this to me. And so that is where I got the...
that's where you get the movements from.
The movements from Sweet Richard, you see. But for some reason... staying in Mason's Addition with my grandfather, because I visited there quite often, I ended up staying there. And there was this man named Phil Cooper who asked me one day if I could draw, right? We started a little group there called the Mason's Addition Boys. And there I was trying to show Phil my little sketch and all that. Oh, he said, you really could draw. I said, man, come draw for us, you see? And so I got directly involved with Junkanoo in that vein. And so his brother kind of taught me how to begin to make hats. I'm a hat specialist, all right? And we used to sew, you know, with needle and cord. We used to sew cardboard with needle and cord. You can imagine the sore fingers at the end of the day. Long before the introduction of contact cement and all that kind of stuff, you know? Right. And then there we were, our little group. Phil went into the bottom one year, and we said, why you have to go all the way in Baintown to rush for somebody else? Well, let's do our own little thing. And that's what happened. And out of that came the Mason's Addition Boys. And then immediately after that, a couple of years, that was around 62, 63, 64, all right. By 64, we got Fort Price. And we were a little small group. And we started to feel good about ourselves, you know. And we didn't have a sponsor in 65. So we joined a group in West Street, in Upper West Street Hill, Meeting Street, West Street Hill, the Prairie Rats at Fred Papa Smith and all them. But there was a man named John Ragnar Munnings who was a Valley boy. He was a Viking, and he also rushed with Spurgeon Smith, all right? out of the pond. And so joining hands with John, we called it a coalition of East Street and West Street, and we came together. And the theme of that costume, what John and those had, was the Saxons. And so me being the fella I was, I went to the meeting they had, and there was a Saxon costume, and a small meeting, 4 or 5 of us. And so Phil Cooper asked me what I thought about the costume that I saw. I said, well, the colors were a little drab for me, and I didn't like the structure of the Saxon helmet. And so I told Phil I'm going to try something. And there I went ahead and did the Saxon helmet, changed the colors and everything like that, and the rest is history. The name Saxon stuck. I started painting these shirts with the big flying S, Saxon on it, and bro.
And here we are today.
History.
All right. So I have to ask, though, for me, looking back, and even as a kid going to Bay Street in the 70s, to me, that's when I really started to see Junkanoo really grow. Correct me if I'm wrong. You had a lot of groups coming on around that time, and the parade really sort of took on a life around that time.
Yes, it did. But it always had a life.
Well, a bigger life, I would say.
But more people became involved. More younger persons like myself, and even my brother, Dr. Emmanuel, he came in and I introduced him to Junkanoo. And he immediately became an integral part of the design concepts of Saxons and all that. So he helped me to get over from 68 when we got our first win, all right? We got our name Saxons in 65, and by 68, we had New Year's Day, we had our first win, the crawfish, favorite Bahamian seafood. And then again, in New Year's of 70, my brother and I, we did the Egypt 1000 BC, where I placed him out front, all right? And he was remarkable. And of course, it went right on, and we got our first Boxing Day win in 1972, right? And then he went off to his dentistry. And of course, I missed him a lot, but we excelled. Yeah.
When did the rivalry really start on Bay Street with the groups?
The rivalry is always there. There was always a rivalry. See, the competition of Junkanoo was what brought on the energy, all right? It don't make sense you going out there just to have fun, The thing is, Phil always said to me, well, we gotta beat Diwali one day.
That was the goal.
And when we say, boy, one day.
Well, tell me, what was it like with that when you were able to finally beat Diwali?
That was 1968, like I said, but it took a lot. I mean, of course, there were sequences in themes, and we said we're gonna do a Bahamian theme to sort of make it nostalgic, so it'll be home. And the crawfish really looked like it was coming out the water that morning. I ain't gonna lie.
Fantastic. Over the years, though, Junkanoo has evolved. Outside of the competition, there are the rules, there are the penalties. How has that affected the parade, do you think?
I think the rules and regulations governing the parade is necessary. Of course, because you can get out of hand. Right? Especially with the cloth and all that, we want to stick to the basics of fringing, all right, and what have you. But cloth was really kind of taken over, so they had to kind of cut that back and say, all right, there are only 10 people allowed in cloth. Anything outside of that is a 5-point penalty. All right, so the rules are good, the timing and. Because now because the groups are so big, we have 70 to 90 minutes from Frederick to the other end. Now, if you don't make it across in time, you also get another penalty, 10-point plan. So, the rules and regulations are good.
Take us back to when the Saxons experienced that first big split with one family. What was that like for the group?
It was not a good day for me, because it was all a surprise. I didn't know this was going on, I saw some movement, right? And I saw some people grouping and all that, and they were grouping more to the west of East Street, more so than the east side of East Street, where we basically come from. So I say, hold on, what's going on here? But anyway, be that as it may, I look at it as a graduation. All right, you come to the college, all right, university, you get your degree, all right, and then you proceed on with your life. And that's how I looked at it at the end of the day. Although I was kind of hurt inside because these guys were my real good friends. You know, I mean, they still are my friends. But
how has those I call them second generation groups really affected, you know, the competition? Because you have roots that came out of the valley, you have one family, you have other groups like Prodigal, yes, Prodigal Sons, and all these other Genesis, all these other groups that are what I call second and third generation. How has that affected the competition?
I think it was vital for the progress of the parades. You know, you look forward to someone to beat.
You got more than just one group to beat. But when you know, and beyond that now, I want to take the discussion a little bit off of Bay Street. When you look at the Junkanoo Museum that's been established, you look at educulture, you look at even the fact that we have Junkanoo performances on Castaway Key. When you look at how Junkanoo had spread beyond just those parades on Bay Street, when you look at that, as one of the sort of the pioneers, what kind of feeling does that invoke in you? How do you feel when you see Junkanoo, even around the world, as you continue to carry it?
I feel good about it. In fact, I started doing Junkanoo shows in 1970 at the Nassau Beach Hotel. We had a small group called the Great Gumbe Dancers. And we were so popular at the Nassau Beach, the Ministry of Tourism used to watch us and say, boy, this is a really good group. And so we did quite a number of promotions for tourism around the world by the name of the Great Gumbe Dancers. And so, yes, Junkanoo to me is everything and everything that we do. When you really look at it, if you look at the sun, you look at the spectrum, you get all of these colors, and so environmentally, Junkanoo is.
What more do you want out of it though? If Percival Francis could have his way, what more would you want to see come out of Junkanoo?
I would like to see a number of things. First of all, I'd like to see a Junkanoo industry, an industry of Junkanoo, whereby all of these wonderful artists that we have, these hundreds of craftsmen, master craftsmen we have, and the potential of them making dolls and other souvenir items and all that, right? And the marketing of Junkanoo through the Ministry of Tourism, right? I'd like to see that stepped up. I don't think we are using Junkanoo in the way that we really should. Junkanoo is $1 billion operation as far as I'm concerned, you know? And we have to look at the intellectual property rights. For example, the venue of Bay Street is run by the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture, right? So there has to be something put in place so that in that particular area, that becomes private and not public, right?
Meaning?
Meaning that if you take my photograph as a photographer, right? You take my work and then you want to sell me a picture for $2,500. You see what I'm saying? So what do I get? Or what do we get? So there has to be some things that are put in place for us to be able to protect our work and, of course, videos and what have you. But we have the opportunity, Jerome, to have big, major networks come in here, like a NBC or CBS or NBC or whatever the case may be, right? Fox or whatever, right? And take this thing to the world and make some good money, you see?
What's preventing us from doing it, though?
We just say, never tried doing it.
We just sit and talking about it.
We just sit and talk about it, you know.
Another area that really causes fans and spectators a lot of anxiety is the parade route itself. there's been a lot there have been many calls over the years for us to expand, move, do all kinds of things. Are we at the place where we have outgrown that space? Is it time for us to look at extending the parade, moving the parade, or are we stuck with it in that space virtually forever?
I always say this, right? If you are going to move out of your house, all right, into another house, that other house has to be built. You can't move and you don't know where you're going. You see what I'm saying? That's the problem what we have. But we have Bay Street, which is the heart of the city of Nassau. That's where all the spirit and the energy is. But we could actually look closely at Bay Street and bring about a plan of how we could expand it and get more seats until such time while we're thinking of moving, we'll have to identify that area. The public have to know that within 2 or 3 years, the Junkanoo will be moving.
So it is possible, is what you're saying?
Yes, it is.
Because some Junkanoo tell me, oh no, we ain't no Junkanoo over there on Bay Street.
Yeah. But there's a possibility. Brazil did it. They did it in Rio, the Sambadrome. Huge. They're making millions. And so we got to be able to, there has to be some profit now, because I can tell you Junkanoo is out of hand in terms of cost. I mean, 1 5-gallon bucket of contact cement is almost $250.
Really?
You can't afford these things, you see? So my question now is, how are we going to survive this escalation in costs? How do we do it? We only get so much from our sponsors. Corporate Bahamas got to kick in somewhere along the way, otherwise we can be in problems.
So I guess that is my question too. How do you survive? When you've got these rising costs, when you've got growing size and groups, you have people who just may not always be able to afford. How are these groups, how are you all surviving?
We survive out of pocket as well. Wow. You got a lot of people who kind of just spend their own monies, Those feathers are very expensive. I can tell you that much, right? And of course, other stuff that we only could provide you with X amount of stuff for your costume. We will do all the design and the construction and everything like that. But of course, you got other folk who, they need a little something too.
So, no, you got to bring that in. Come right. You got to come right to me. Yeah. Most definitely. As we get ready to wrap up the segment now, I'm going to ask you, what do you want the future of Junkanoo to be? When you look back and you say, okay, I helped to build this thing, but looking forward, this is what I want.
We did a paper, all right? We did a white paper. Rashad Martin, our attorney, and Eddie Dames and myself, we did a white paper that we want to present to the government on the futuristic aspects of Junkanoo and where we should take it, all right? And one of the things that we are considering is the Bahamas Junkanoo Authority, which will be a full-time body, all right, whereby out of that can come the Junkanoo Foundation and all these other rest of stuff. But we want to present this to the government, a clear picture. I have the package right here, all right, of the authority and all the stuff that we want to do. By the way, I just want to make this point that we have just secured the rights for Junkanoo, international intellectual cultural heritage, all right? We've been approved by UNESCO. And so now we can boast that nobody can touch Junkanoo in the world. This belongs to us now. And we need to brag about this, man. We need to let the world know that Junkanoo is owned and approved for the Bahamas.
This ours.
Yes,
all right.
Yes, sir.
Well, Brother Francis, again, I want to thank you for everything that you have done for this industry, for this art form, for the people of the Bahamas. You really represent, I think, the best of our culture. To be able to take an art form, to take something that was, as Arlene Ashford said, looked down upon, and help us to make it now something that's recognized by the world, by UNESCO. And I love the idea of the authority. I think it's a brilliant idea. I think its time has come, and hopefully it'll be embraced by the powers that be. So thank you again for all that you have done. Keep up the great work. You know we on them opposite sides, so I can see you on big. I'll see you on big. When we come back, we've got our final segment. You are watching On the Record. Welcome back to On the Record. In our final segment, we are joined by a man who has also dedicated his life to Junkanoo, Trevor Davis. Despite the ongoing dispute surrounding the future of one of Junkanoo's most iconic groups, the Valley Boys, it's hard to deny Davis's contribution to the craft. Trevor, welcome back to On the Record. While you are not in the same age category as our previous guests, I want to talk really about your involvement with Junkanoo and why you have dedicated so much of your life and focus to the art form.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Jerome. And it seems like it was just yesterday we was talking.
We were talking about something else.
But it was a good thing. It's another Bohemian culture, which is our Rican-scrape music. But for me, persons who know or who may not know, I was born and raised in the Valley. And when I say born and raised in the Valley, I was literally born and raised in the Valley, which means that I was not born in Princess Margaret Hospital. I was born through Rolls Avenue, and Rolls Avenue is that area right behind D.W. Davis and Apple Street. That's where I was born. So for me, I was introduced to Junkanoo at a very young age. I remember at the age of 4 or 5, on the back road, our summer days, we will take the rock and the marbles and put it in the can and mash it down, and we'll be on the back road and we'll be imitating what really we heard was happening on Bay Street. And me and my childhood friends, we played there. And then some of my early memory and recollection was going on the ball field. If anybody know where the ball field was, there was a clinic there. And after the clinic was abandoned, the Black Souls would use that as a shack back in the days. And I remember as a little boy going in the shack, and that's where I met Edward, the neighborhood young artisan at that time. And he was in that building. I was amazed by what was going on. And shortly after that, we moved from out of the Valley, Rolls Avenue. We went to what we would have called the suburbs, then into Marathon Estate, but I keep finding my way back down there. And I was really, really like, how do I get back? How do I get to the main Bay Street? How do I be a part of this Valley Boys? And I remember at the age of 12, going in Champion Sportsland, and those who know Champion Sportsland back then, that was the store that our leader, our great leader, Winston Gus Cooper on, and get my Valley Boy shirt. And I only heard that you're supposed to paste the pants and make sure you don't let it go in the oven too long, because with the flour pop, and you got to make sure I put a little bit of kerosene oil in it so the rat don't get it. And I found myself on Bay Street at the age of 12, from Marathon Estate, walking the Bay Street and partaking in the parade. Now, I was in the back of the Valley Boys then with my Valley Boy shirt and my bicycle horn in my mouth, and I was blowing for the Valley Boys. And you couldn't tell me nothing else. And my sister was very good friends and co-workers of Peter Gould Tanquest. And back then, everybody knew that Gould was one of the co-leaders of the Valley Boys then. And immediately the next year, I was in the Valley Boys shack. And I remember every Saturday, every Sunday, going to shack religiously until I got to get on the parade. That year I was going as a naked. Back then we used to have the naked dances, and I went on the parade. And every year it just grew and grew and grew. And for me, I was so involved, and so the love for Junkanoo, as Eileen talked about earlier, this is just in us. We love this Junkanoo. We're passionate about the Junkanoo, so we did whatever it takes. One, to make sure that the Valley Boys was going to be victorious on those parade. The pride that was instilled when you walk in that shack. And so I quickly moved up the ladder in the Valley Boys. So by 2000, I started in 79. By 84, I was taking what we call the off-the-shoulder costume. And then I moved up the ranks. By 1986, I was pacing lead costume. And by 1991, I've already won my first best costume on Bay Street. And at that time, I think, and probably still is the youngest person in the history to ever win best costume, with the most famous costume today, and it still could be argued, Samilo Butler, the champion of the people. That was 1991. And for me, at that time, I think that was the pinnacle of my career, because at that time, there was 8 to 9 lead costumes coming out, the Valley Boys. Wow. The Saxons would have had another 8 to 9 costumes. The Makers might have had 4 to 6 lead costumes. And here I am. A lot of competition in the lead costume category. And little old me and my sidekick at the time, Hannah Boy. And I must say a special thanks to Anthony Morley, who was the builder design at the time. And we walked down Bay Street with the champion of the people, Samilo Butler, still one of the most talked about costumes today, and conquered Bay Street.
What is that like, though? And I guess because, you know, we've talked, I heard Voda talk about the competition is what drives you.
Yeah.
And that's what drives you to be the best and to get down there and to do the best. But what is it like when you're getting there and you're like, you know what, I know this is a winning piece, or I feel this is a winning piece, and you line up getting ready to go. What is that moment like when you're getting ready to take it?
Oh, wow. That sends chills down your body. That's the moment that you've been waiting for. That's the moment when you leave work early. That's the moment when you leave your families for days in and days out, and now it all comes together, and you'll be like, wow, is it worth it? And you look at your masterpiece and say, yes, it's worth it.
And that's the question I always ask. Like, boy, is it? Do you all feel at the end of the day that this is worth it, all of the sacrifice and time?
Sacrifice, yes, because we love our country, we love our culture, but I think we move it now to a point, Jerome, where persons are now starting to say, hey, it's evolution. We did it for the labor of love back then, but now we're in a new era. Well, what is the reward?
Which is one of the reasons I thought you were a good guest to bring on at this point, because I want to talk to the generation that is a part of that evolution. Our previous guests helped to get the art form to where it is, but I think you, myself, others in this same age grouping represent in many instances the future. And what is the future? Because to me, I see it sometimes as dying, because people, first of all, it's expensive. There's a lot going into Junkanoo. There's a lot of time, energy. So what is the next step and stage for Junkanoo?
For me, I think for persons like you say, our age bracket, I think the next step for Junkanoo is not to just be inclusive for Bahamians. We have to find a way where we could sell Junkanoo to the world. Junkanoo need to not just continue to be a spectator event for Bahamians, but we now need to make Junkanoo a festival. I spoke about this in 2002. Mm-hmm. I had the opportunity to make a presentation to persons like, look, we go to Bay Street, we put in so much time just for 2 mornings. Why don't we, as a country, take Junkanoo and make Junkanoo a 2-week festival? What do I mean by that? What do I mean is that we could be so creative and innovative, and we have done this 20 years now. You could imagine where we would have been today. But we could start off with the Junior Junkanoo as one parade. You could have your international night as a parade. And what do I mean by international night? Because person will be like, oh, why you want to bring foreigners to be a part of our Junkanoo? It's our culture. It's our culture. God gave it to us. But that don't mean we must be selfish with it.
But it happens in every other place in the world. People travel to carnivals. They go to Caravana, Carafest. They go to these events to participate and to be involved.
And so now you have that young man that is in the shack for 6 months of the year is now getting paid for what is work. What do I mean by that? I mean that the international night, persons can come and rush, but they pay into rush. They leave in thousands, and if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in our local economy, not with the hotels, but over the hill. because the persons who are making these costumes will now be compensated. And then you will find an influx of persons coming to the Bahamas just for Junkanoo, because as it stands now, a tourist can't get on Bay Street because before you know it, the bleachers are already sold out. We have problems getting tickets for our
before
loved
tickets
ones.
go on sale, I mean, it's like the moment they go on sale,
Yeah.
they're just about gone.
Yeah, and so you now have a cultural event that people are flying in to be a part of, because this generation, XYZ Generation X, they don't want to sit down in no bleachers.
No,
they
sir.
want to be a part of.
No, sir.
And the minute that we can engage them to be a part of, we don't have to be worrying about who's going to pay for the feathers. We don't worry about who's have to pay for the contact. We don't worry about the guy in the shack need help with his medical bills, because we have an influx of money is coming in through the business adventure, and that still does not affect our competition part. Because we still go to Bay Street Boxing Day night as a competition, you still go New Year's as a competition, but in between, you have smaller events going on.
I want to go back to when Carnival was first introduced to the Bahamas, which you are involved in, and it was all this pushback from people in the community saying it's not our culture, it's not who we are. But the amount of participation from young Bahamians, that same generation that you talked about,
Right.
showed me that people want to participate in something. It's not just I'm going to sit on the side of the road or sit on the bleachers and watch, but the amount of people Bahamians who participated in Carnival was phenomenal, because, and to me, it showed that people want that experience.
Yes, and then also, you could also tell that by Sunday night practices.
Oh, yeah.
The amount of person that want to be a part of practice on Sunday night,
Yeah.
you
Me and
can't even practice properly because
Yeah.
everybody wants to be involved.
You can't, I don't know how y'all do it.
Well, I'm telling you how we're going to do it this year. We're going to make some changes. One of the things that we intend to do this year to get more persons involved, and to the same thing you're talking about, we intend to start our practice at 6 p.m. on the Potterski Dock. 6 p.m. So every parent, every teenager, every kid that wants to rush, they could come and be a part of our first lap.
Wow.
So that rush now, you could come from anywhere in Nassau with your parents, with your guardian, and you could be part of that first rush. So we'll rush from 6 to 7. And that is the family rush. We are preparing the next generation for our culture. Then after that, our first lap starts at 8, which is all new again, and by 9:45 the second lap starts. And so we want to bring the families back involved into Junkanoo.
I know we're running out of time, and there's obviously something I want to talk about at the end, but I want to go back to 2002, and I remember when the then minister responsible for youth, Neville Wisdom,
Yes.
had this idea of even the prejudging on Awaki, and he had this, he was pushing to get to that festival.
Yes.
And I remember thinking at the time, well, this isn't a bad idea. This is because it gave people an opportunity to see the costumes ahead of time and to do things a little differently. But there was so much pushback. But I thought, this is not such a bad idea.
And hence, that's the same time I was making the presentation. So now you see where a lot of the ideas came
Yeah.
from. So you could imagine how far we would have been ahead of this game by now. You could imagine how much more. We're talking about 7-8 million tourists coming. We're talking about 3-4, maybe 7,000 people just coming for that particular parade. And we know the numbers in Carnival as well.
I think that's a missed opportunity. But I gotta ask, I gotta bring you in. There is an ongoing legal battle between yourself and others within the Valley Boys. A painful situation for many of us to watch. And I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of it because it is an ongoing legal battle, and I don't want it, whatever we say here, to affect the outcome of that in any way. But are you worried that the group may not be able to recover from this?
No, not the least bit. Not
Why?
the least bit.
Why do you say that?
Because the Valley Boys, you cannot have Junkanoo without the Valley Boys Junkanoo organization. So I'm not at least worried. We would have done everything according to the law, and the law of the land will prevail. And that's all I could say about that.
No, I don't want to get into for the benefit of our viewers.
And the minister was very clear. How do you have Junkanoo without the Valley Boys?
Mm-hmm.
The Valley Boys is a brand, it's a household name. We're going to protect it, we're going to uphold it. And to the question that you would ask your other guests, what is next for Junkanoo? We have to take Junkanoo to the world. And Valley Boys is going to be a part of this world explosion that's going to take Junkanoo to the world.
You know, in my Valley household, we have to say it. Only two set of people that's come to Junkanoo. Junkanoo fans and Valley Boys fans or Valley Boys haters.
Yeah. Well, I bet to say this Junkanoo, I think it's fitting that we have more bleachers than any parade, because everybody who haven't been to Junkanoo in years want to come to see what the Valley Boys is doing this year.
I want to ask so very quickly, have we outgrown the space on Bay Street? Is it time to move? Is it time to do more?
We have definitely outgrown the space on Bay Street. I remember, again, back to when I started rushing, we used to be 7 across in the Bella Lang. I rang bells.
Right.
It was 7 across. Now you can hardly get 3 across. And so that also impact the length of time to get across. So the groups are not necessarily as big as we think they are. It's just that the road has gotten narrow, and every year it gets smaller.
And bigger costumes.
And bigger costume. And that also affects the music. Sometimes you say, oh, well, the music, for that affects the music. So again, hopefully, we could find a venue that's conducive, and more importantly, hold more people. If we have a 10,000, 15,000 seat in the arena, I'm sure we'll be able to fill that.
Definitely. Trevor, thank you very much. I know we have one opportunity to talk again in the future when all of this is resolved.
Yes, most definitely.
I'm looking forward to that. You know, I like you. My heart in the Valley, but I'm a Junkanoo lover. You know, I support all Junkanoo groups. I support the art form, what it means for our culture, what it means for our people. And like you and so many others, I'm optimistic about the future because it has to survive.
It will survive.
That's good to know. Well, as we come to the close of tonight's episode of On the Record, we'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of our guests for joining us and for sharing their insights on the legacy, evolution, and of course the future of Junkanoo. We've gained a deeper understanding of the challenges and of course the triumphs that shape this beloved cultural movement. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in. We hope tonight's conversation has inspired you to support and engage with the rich cultural tradition of Junkanoo, both now and for generations to come. We'll see you next time right here on The Record. Good night.